Have you ever been gaming or working online classes and your internet service constantly gets interrupted? First Nations Fiber is about to ensure that just won't happen again. Get ready for high speed at a new level. Click on fnfiber.com and sign up today. First Nations Fiber, empowering people through connectivity.
Kimberly Welcome to Kwakaratón, our tourism podcast. We are sharing our stories with you. I am the tourism development manager from Kahnawake Tourism, and this is our podcast series. Today we will be talking about the hot topic this week, I think, in the country, around Turtle Island, around the world, truth and reconciliation, and what it means to us. So sitting in our studio today, we have the lovely Jessica Hernandez. She's one of our local artists. She's a local actor. She's very involved in our theater. She's a mother and a community member. So I'm very happy she's here with us today.
Hello.
We also have Bronwyn Gowanahoe Johns, and she's our public relations officer, former events coordinator and tour guide, still doing some tours. So please welcome her as well.
Hi, cool.
And we have Harley Delarone, and Harley is one of our tour guides, former teacher, former principal at our local school, and we love having him around. He teaches us so much. So welcome, Harley.
Go ahead.
So before we get started, I did just want to put it out there for people listening. You know, we will be discussing truth and reconciliation, a little bit about residential schools. So if it's a sensitive topic for you, please be prepared. And we won't be going really in depth of any historical aspects. I think we're also not trained professionals in any types of counseling services. So we're really just out here speaking about our opinions based on our experiences, any research we've done, and encounters we've had. So I just want to put that out there for our listeners to be mindful of that. We're always respectful of people's opinions and what got you here in your life today. So I guess to get started, I just wanted to ask Jessica right away, because part of what our community has done in terms of truth and reconciliation when everything first came out a few years ago about Kamloops, Jessica initiated a project in the community, and it was the 215 Moccasin Project, and we've been working closely on that. So I wanted to ask you, Jess, if you could first introduce yourself and how you got here today and the 215 Moccasin Project.
Hi, yes. So my name's Jessica Hernandez. I live here in Kahnawake with all of you. I'm a mother of two, and I own a business here in Kahnawake called Nisia's Accessories. I'm also a big part of the theater here in Kahnawake, and I work with Kimberly on our beautiful new building going up. So we've got to work closely together over the past
10 years.
10 years. Kimberly was also my daughter's skating coach, so I have a soft spot in my heart for her. But yeah, I started the 215 project because previous to the 215 project, when we had the lockdown during COVID, I had put out a challenge for everybody out of concern that people would have nothing to do when there was a lockdown during COVID. And that lockdown was the second lockdown in January. So I believe we were given about a month's notice that everything was shutting down January or 1st or December 30th. I don't remember, for a whole month. And it concerned me because, as we all know, January is mental health month, right? People have a hard time. And in my head, I said, oh my God, you're going to stick people home by themselves. Some people don't have the luxury of living with big families.
In the dead of winter.
With no access to services, nothing. So I said, you know what, let me put out a challenge and see who would be interested in wanting to do this. I started to draw up a design, and literally it flowed out of my pencil. It just came together. I got them all printed out and I posted it, and literally I had swarms of people coming into the store to pick up these sheets of paper and their supplies for this project. I didn't know what was going to come of it, but it turned out to be a great success. So when the whole issue of them finding the graves at Kamloops came out, I had a very hard time with it because, you know, you hear about it and we've always known. And I always say this, it wasn't news to us. It's something we've lived with. You know, our grandparents tell us the stories, our teachers tell us the stories. We always knew. But seeing the world react the way they did was like, oh, we can finally believe you now. And it bothered me. It bothered me to the point where I was having grief with it. And I had a heavy weight on my shoulders for maybe a week or two when it first came out. I go on social media and I see what people are posting, and you have all of these celebrities writing about it, or people like influencers talking about it. And it's like, why didn't you listen to us? And so I didn't know how to deal with that grief. And so I said, you know what, let me try something again, just like COVID, and let me do a project with everybody. And maybe this can help people the way I've been feeling, because I'm sure I'm not the only one, and it'll help them. So I put out a call for people to make moccasins together, and just to say, sit at home, and if you can do it, make a pair of moccasins and let's get this going. I didn't know what was going to come out of it. There's like very many levels to the project. Mm-hmm. So that was the first part. Now people start to send the moccasins in. I'm getting them in the mail. I'm getting them in the store. People are sending moccasins that were their first time making them. Somebody sent a pair of moccasins that were their late child's moccasins who died from cancer. Like, stories with these moccasins were just coming out.
Each pair has their own story.
Yes, every single pair has their own story. And I start to lay them out on my big table at the store. If you come in the store, we have a huge table. And I thought it was going to be really hard for me. But as I started to lay them out, I just realized and I noticed that all I felt was love. It's like the children weren't forgotten. It was something else, because you look at it and it made me feel so happy that they had this. It was like so much love on the table. They're not forgotten. They're not in a grave somewhere. And I couldn't believe it. And so once the deadline passed, we still kept getting them in. And I still have people asking. I always tell them, send them in.
I still haven't finished mine.
And I'd like to put out another call to say, like, but I don't know, like, you have it now, so I don't want to overwhelm you.
No, but I think it's important to know, for people to know that the opportunity is still there to complete them, because it's kind of a taxing process. It's not just, it's hard to do the beadwork. Personally, like I've finished other pairs of moccasins. I've done other beadwork in the meantime, but I can't bring myself to pick up that pair. And when you put the call out, I was really drawn to do it. My mother started making a pair. My mother never made a pair of moccasins. My mother's a great beater. If anybody knows my mom, Soda Bear Creations. She's at all of our events. She's selling all over the world.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was like over 500 pieces, I think. Like, she's incredible. She made a pair of amps. So she asked me, can you make me the moccasins? So for us to sit there, that was the first time we ever sat together and made a pair of moccasins. I taught my mom how to make moccasins that night. And that was a really touching experience, because, the reason why we were doing it tied right into that, sitting at that kitchen table, that my mom couldn't teach me that tradition, but I could teach her because I learned it, and we're getting our traditions back through our younger generations. But I still haven't picked my pair up, because I started making them the same size that my son was, because I had just made him a pair and my son was 6 at the time. And I said, well, if I'm going to make a pair, that's the size that those kids would have been going to school. And I couldn't finish them. And I don't know if maybe I'll try.
When the time comes, I think that you probably will be able to.
But it's important for people to know that the opportunity is still there, because we're all working through all this news, and it's kind of in our face every single day and what we're doing in tourism. And we see it. We work a lot with the outside. We do a lot of outreach. We have to bring up these topics because people want to learn and they want to know what happened. But it's not as like prevalent in everybody's everyday talking about it, but it is part of our everyday lives, no matter what we do. So, yeah.
Yeah. So after we collected them all, I started to get calls from schools around the community. So I actually went on a mini tour with Iorì, KSS, Grenunha. Did I go anywhere else? I don't remember. I started within the community, and it was great because it was a way that I can talk about it to little kids. It's hard to discuss these things with the little ones because they don't really understand. So it was almost a more lighthearted way of teaching them these stories, but them also seeing like, I could fit these, and I gave them time to ask questions to me, and they all had such thoughtful questions, even at young ages, you know, up to the older ages. And I really love that. And then I was asked to go to Burling Academy, and it wasn't even during Truth and Reconciliation. It was just, I think it was in October or November. They asked me to come in and do the presentation, and I brought Kateri Ostrike with me. And so she helped me. She did a little speech, and I had my thing, and they all decided that they wanted to make a little project. So they actually did something as a school on their own to bead and make things, and they had a display at their school. So I really, really appreciated that. And that to me was Truth and Reconciliation, because up until then, those words meant nothing to me. I didn't see anything of it until I think Burling Academy stepped forward and took that.
It's the action. It's the action behind the words. That's very important, that you can't just say these words and not do anything to follow up and not do anything to encourage that education and that understanding and the empathy.
So that's really what the 215 project was meant to do. And it kind of outgrew me a little bit in the sense that I'm a small business owner. I do have to be at work every day. I want to get the message out, but doing that is also giving my time, which I don't mind, but the reality is I have to make a living. So I guess that's why you guys stepped in.
That's where we kind of partnered up, because we were getting a lot of those requests. And it kind of leads into my question for Bronwyn is, we've been traveling a lot for educational visits to various schools or, different places. Maybe it'd be corporate or tourism events. And I mean, I know I've traveled around with it. You have some of our other staff as well. But I wanted to ask, what's it been like for you? What's your experience?
Well, the first time I saw the exhibit was walking into the art market 2 years ago when we had it at Cattery Hall. I was scheduled to work it and I thought I was prepared, but seeing it for the first time and seeing it with Ogi's Ogu's painting in the background was more impactful than I had even imagined. So I cried a few times during the day. Talking about it with different people just triggers you. Especially having done tours with survivors that came through the community on different occasions, and to hear firsthand their stories, to hear the things that they went through about being kept in cages and stuff like that was really added a whole other level to it. So it is very heavy and it is very hard. And I smudge every time when I go home, because that's what I ask the survivors, how they've come to be at peace with everything that they went through. And they say they smudge multiple times a day. Anytime they feel that they need to, that's what they do. And they've forgiven. So that was huge for me to hear that from their perspective and to hear their personal stories. So that adds a whole other layer when I do the presentation. And I've done quite a bit of research, and I follow a lot of Indian country movement pages. So I see a lot of stuff across the country, in Canada, across the country, in the US, of stories of people, experiences, things that are happening, stories that are coming out, things that people didn't know. We know that our children were taken, but the other story is about the babies. People don't talk about the babies that were conceived in these places. And that's what ties in the documentary that we hosted in the community on Tuesday evening. It was called Sugarcane, and it's by National Geographic. And it is a story about the babies and the investigation that went into discovering these truths. And it happened during the same time that the bodies were discovered at Kamloops. So it was unbelievable, the timing on that. And the story is so impactful. And to see it is really something that I think everybody should do. Mm-hmm. It is still playing in theaters until today in Montreal. After that, it will be streaming on different networks. Disney will be streaming it, and stateside it will be on Hulu. So definitely check it out. And it's part of the healing that our people need to do.
I find it's a safe way to start.
Exactly.
It doesn't get too heavy into details, but it talks about all the important points and everything that happened, really. It summarizes. It really, I took a note as you were talking earlier, Jessica. I noticed it makes the outside world have to believe us now. Not that they want to always, but that they have to, because we have these proofs that we're finding that we are coming forward now, and we're not being pushed aside.
Denialism is a real thing. Yeah. It's so real that just a few days ago, they pushed a bill through the Congress to give fines and jail time to people who deny residential schools. It was against the law for people to deny the Holocaust. And now they are moving forward with that because there are so many politicians out there and people in positions of power that are saying that we made it up.
Was this, that's in the United States?
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, Canada.
This week.
This week.
Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. 'Cause
Yeah,
you said
I follow
when you said
that stuff.
When you said Congress.
The House of Congress.
Yeah, it made me comments. Yeah.
Comments. Yeah,
I
there you
thought
go.
Congress. I said, well, United States. I didn't realize, because one thing I've noticed is, is that a lot of the information out there it's way ahead, more ahead. It seems like in Canada than the United States.
For sure.
The United States, for whatever factors, they've done the same thing, but for whatever reasons, there's they just it's not out there as much. I perceive, that's my perception anyway.
No, they haven't addressed it.
Yeah. And so, everything's just hunky dory and stuff. It comes back. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but some of the things that before you mentioned, Jessica, about how we always knew that we knew our people, our community, we knew at different levels, of course, depending on the family, sometimes depending upon who was talking to who. So some of that, I know back in the 80s, a lot of this recent currents of finding it wasn't really a surprise to me. I'm kind of like, really, just because if you may have been in one of in our social studies class when I was the teacher, every year we would show a film. I can't remember the name of it. That was about the subject. It was part of our curriculum for grade 11 students to see this one film about residential schools. It was not well acted and stuff like that. It wasn't, that's one thing I thought about, but I felt like, having done that, I did some research and reading and et cetera. So when all of this, I said, well, didn't people know? Like, I was a little bit of I guess, I don't know if the word is cynical or whatever. I was saying, we should have known. We've always known, or I've known. And it was kind of like, but then it dawned on me and stuff like that. I began to realize that no, they don't talk about it. They never did that. And it made me feel kind of angry.
Yeah, it was a lot of anger.
A lot of anger. And so it was like, this is another thing that's covered up, or another thing that's not talked about, or another thing that's avoided. And so then, and of course, I could talk later about my own, family background a bit, and then how some of it, and there's many cases we've probably, are aware of it ourselves, but that whole thing about how it's impacted us. Language, for example, and the things we lost and are trying to get back. And not completely lost, of course, but we've suffered. And so.
It shows how much energy has been put in by the government to hide that truth that nobody knew.
But if you think about it, that anger and the belief, when somebody comes out and says, I was abused, whatever way form that is, you're supposed to believe them. No matter if there's proof or not.
Yeah.
And they never gave us that courtesy.
No.
They never did.
Get over it, all that kind of stuff.
And our people were abused to the biggest extent you can imagine, yet it took proof. And that just...
And it created a vicious cycle where our people were brought up in abuse. And then the next generations who went through it, it was brought up in that documentary we just watched, where when you asked for help, you told the people who were in authority, and then they send you to the next person. They send you to the Indian agent. Indian agent sends you to the RCMP. RCMP says, go see your parents. Then your parents beat you up because you shouldn't be saying those things. And they didn't believe you. So it created this cycle of suppression of emotions and hiding what happened and just dealing with it. And
it was the mentality, don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Well, I think
here we are making waves.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's still a lot of, it's not like in the past, don't rock the boat. I really feel that, that maybe it was when they would say that in the past, well, then it would get covered up. But now there's people, institutions, government that are still, they'll say they are, but they don't want us to rock it too much. Yeah. And that's, I'm cynical, okay, about this whole subject though.
Yeah.
But, and first of all, and what I mean is, of course, all the great things that have been done by our people, first of all, that's needed. That's important.
And the the first steps is, like with truth and reconciliation, it's that hot topic. We work in tourism. People want to learn from us.
Yeah.
And one of the first things we tell people are allow our people to heal. We need to create our own spaces. We need to be okay with one another. Not everybody is all right talking about it. When we get requests for guided tours or visits, I say, well, we have to find the right person because not all of our tour guides will talk about this. And you have to respect that. It's a difficult topic. So that's part of the education, and part of our healing in our own communities. Yeah, it's very difficult. It's a difficult topic, and we're doing it. We're doing well moving forward. There's a whole movement within Indian country, right? Like we're supporting one another.
I think we're learning to rock the boat. And I think our younger generation is helping us do that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Exactly. I think that's important that we continue to maybe do more than rock the boat, maybe throw some water in there and start floating, stuff like that. But but I get the whole idea of and what we need to do, because I'm still unsatisfied with the things that have occurred on the, shall we say, the society outside and government and all the programs. Of course, I was talking to you this briefly, Kimberly, the other day, and how my feelings on it. And I'm sitting here, and I'm a lot of the programs. There's funds coming in. Okay, let's be funds coming into this to rebuild. They're all good. Most of them are fantastic, and they're put in, and they're in. To me, most of them are in the right way or in the right areas. I think none of our students, none of our students, for example, who want to learn the language, or anybody who should have to be worrying about where am I going to get money? How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to get through the next 2 years, for example? I think you can relate to all that. And struggling, okay? And the fact that we only have one group of 15, 16 a year. We should have unlimited access for our students and unlimited support, because that what has been done. I'm jumping ahead a little bit on this.
No, for sure. But
and those things are. I'm on a Vanier College. I'm on the Indigenous Advisory Board, and one of the things they're talking about doing. They've done a lot of great things. They're really trying to. Educate their own students and provide safe place for the Indigenous students. Part of it is to get more students. And I'm cynical, as I said. Part of it, when I'm sitting in there, is saying certain things, thinking, well, are you just trying to get more students in place? You're trying to look good, So I had that in the back of my head. But one of the things I asked, all of these positive things that were happening, and I said, when does it become the flavor of last month? Yeah, because this, again, I'm being cynical.
I don't think the word is cynical, though, Harley. I think it's realistic.
Honest.
And I said that in 5 years, okay, you got these programs in. When in 5 years that they're going to all of a sudden get word, well, we have to do cuts. And what gets cut first?
Language and culture.
The programs they have there. Language and culture. Funds coming for whoever else in our communities, we kind of, that realistic instead of cynical attitude is that's going to happen. Many of our, you may feel that's unfortunate, but I believe that's how our people are thinking. We've come to the point where we think like that, and it's part of who we are because we don't trust. And it goes back to that whole thing of not trusting. They're going to take your kids. They're going to do this to you. They tell them we're going to take care of them. We're going to feed them. They're going to be better off. They've proven that it was not so people we don't trust, among other things. The only thing was the land. We'll take your land. Well, they did that. We trust that they would do that. So, and then that takes my next step is that for me, the part about truth, the truth to me is getting out there, people telling their story, telling their truth, making it public, and the outside people making sure that they
do better.
But first of all, that they learn, that they hear, that they learn. So the outside school systems can't just the great teacher that says, I'm going to do something. And here, and it's in one school.
It shouldn't just be on all the teachers. It needs to be the school board. It's got to be exactly
in there where you have to do it. It has to be done.
And we see that change coming, like our fellow coworker, Dwayne, he's working out at New Frontier School Board. And we see the strides that they're making. They're taking a lot of steps. They're doing great. by their Ungwehue students and even their staff, and they're including our people as their staff, and they're doing more. But really, that's the only board we're seeing doing that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was invited to go and do a presentation at LPP school in Chateauguay last week, French school. And it was the second year that I went. I went last year. But it wasn't organized by the school. It was an individual teacher who is responsible for activities with the kids. So it wasn't a program in the class. It was just, we're going to bring you in because I feel it's important. I think that being neighbors to Kahnawake, our students and our staff should be supporting, should be aware, and should be learning from you guys. So he brought me in for their double back-to-back lunches. I sat up in the cafeteria, and he helped to draw in people to come because people were nervous to come and talk. But then a lot of girls would come up because they see all the beautiful moccasins and they're like, well, can I buy? And then they get there and no, you can't buy. But if you want to buy, you can come to our community. But this is the story behind it. And this is what it is. And then some students did cry. Some students did feel that connection. And that is amazing to see, that caring for fellow human. And that's what we need, because when you have that empathy, that's when you get the support.
And we do have a lot of ambassadors who are out there, like that teacher as a prime example, who are doing it. You know, we were just in Montreal the other day for a meeting with their Tourism Montreal team, and they want to do better and they want to include more. And it's about creating those relationships, making ambassadors so that they can be out there, you know, representing to their governments what they've learned. That's how we're going to really make movements and shake the boat within their government, right? Like, we need to maintain our sovereignty. We need to take care internally. They can go deal with theirs.
Exactly.
It's steps, like you said. I mean, these are positive steps, the things you're talking about. The individual teachers, but it's got to grow, and it doesn't start. We don't get to the top of the stairs.
No, it's grassroots
it's
movement.
One step at a time. Grassroots movements, putting pressure on whoever whether they be superiors or their board or whatever. But it needs to get to the point where the students it's part of what they're learning, and not just in Chateauguay, because it's got a whole bunch of. Students from Kahnawake students. It's got to be all these other communities, because those people on the outside, and
that's what's really nice when we see groups of teachers coming in. Right. We get groups of teachers coming in from the city school boards that are educating their staff, because it really is the staff and the principals and all that that's going to make the change. Because, like I said, I was invited into that school by an organizer, but even some teachers didn't stop to talk or to find out what it was about, because they still have some racism in them and they're not ready to support us yet because they haven't educated themselves. So, but the teachers that did come up last year and did find out and did connect and did speak to us this year, they were so excited to come up and show me all the projects that their classes did this year before the Truth and Reconciliation Day, because they had learned last year.
Yeah, so I was at Loyola last week, and previous weeks I was at Mary Gardner, and I'm supposed to be going to Centennial Park because I do beading workshops as well. But at Loyola, you know how you were saying that they were upset and they were empathetic? I think one of the things I love is when the kid stands there and they're asking questions, and a lot of questions. Because then it means that they're thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I love. But at the same time, you're going to these schools, and one of the things I ask them when I start is, I tell them I'm from Kahnawake. Do you know where Kahnawake is? And you know what I get? Isn't that near Nunavut?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we're like 10, 15 minutes away from you. Do you know that you have at least 4 students here from Kahnawake? No. So it's like, okay, well, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to teach you. But I want them to ask questions. I don't want necessarily them to be all upset. I want them to ask questions and fill their brains. And I think that's one of the more important things is, like, how do you get them to want to ask questions and bring it home to their parents? Because they're the hard ones to get to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the kids are nonstop with their questions, and they are the ones who have their eyes open for the future. So they're the ones that see what has happened, see what the government has done, and now they're the hope for the future.
Well, it's, it's sad to say, like you said, the children, they're the ones exactly you need to make those changes. The parents, forget it, to a certain large degree anyway, to make really significant changes. Fortunately, the sad part is the outside government years back knew that, and they still knew that.
Mhm.
So who did they go after?
The children.
It just kind of drives that home a little bit
Mhm.
in a kind of a
It's kind of
sad
ironic.
way, yeah. but they knew that, and then now we are looking, and from my angle, that's exactly it. Having been in education, that's where the changes happen. The young people, I've seen all the movers and shakers in this community. Not all, but a lot of them were students I had where we were talking about who they were. And in our curriculum, or at least families are doing that also. So they're coming in and they've come around and they've said, they look around them, they're moving a lot of different things culturally, language-wise, et cetera, in so many areas, So we need to really look at the future. These changes are not going to happen in 2 years, in 5 years.
And I heard that same sentiment from Odita Garda.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a talk at the St. George's School on Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I happened to go and I was listening, and he said that to the children.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you are all the future. You're the future doctors, teachers, leaders. It's up to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that you're learning and you're listening right now, asking questions, making relationships, because it's going to be all of you who are going to make change and do better. Because it's 100% true. Like it's always the youth who are going to get us through.
20 years, I hope we're not in the same stage, our community.
I don't
or
think
our
we
people.
will be.
And I hope we're much further along, and now it's other issues, questions of the same area, but we're moved ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I think because of all the good work our community's been doing, and I can say maybe for ourselves, I can see a shift in the way that our kids are growing up to how we grew up. And I do see that change. And that's just that we're present and we're listening to them and we're home for them and we're home on the weekends and we're making sure that they're doing what they need to do. So our kids now are not, getting in trouble the way they were. They want to be home with us. And I think that just in that itself is just beautiful.
We're the generation that's doing healing. Our mothers and grandmothers weren't able to talk about the traumas that they went through. So that's something that has just started to develop in our age group. So that's where that shift, you can see it. The other night at the documentary, the people that were in the crowd were people who are working on their traumas and bettering themselves. And my own mother has come full circle with the movement that's coming and has opened up so much more in my whole life. And that's something I'm so grateful for.
It kind of goes into my next question. I guess my last question for our podcast today. It's a good segue. I wanted to ask, as parents and grandparents, the four of us here in the room, are your children aware of the Truth and Reconciliation movement, and how has the recent and then historical events affected them? We kind of already discussed it a little bit, but I wanted to, we're saying how the youth are moving forward, but how is it affecting the youth? Have you noticed anything?
So in my own home, we're very big on sitting together at the table. Whether they're doing homework, you're sitting with them, you're eating together. So a lot of discussion happens there. And I know at the time, when everything happened or that it came out, we talked a lot about how we were feeling. And I think expressing how I was feeling to them made them understand a little bit. But they're learners, they're thinkers. And I feel like they took from that what they could and wanted to do better within themselves. That's what I see. Because right now, my son, he's in school, but he's wanting to learn the language. So he's taking language courses. He's, working for KOR, and he's loving that. He wants to pick everybody's brain. I'm sure he's picking your brain, Harley.
Yeah.
He's doing all these things, even though he was in a outside school for 5 years. He has always said, even when he went there, that he wants to come back and learn. And it was like, that's great. And I see him doing that and reading and getting as much information as he can. And even my daughter, she really loves the language, so she would speak as much as she could with her father. And now that she's on the outside, I'm hoping that continues. But I do have hope that even if it doesn't, she's going to be like him and be like, okay, when I'm done my schooling, I'm going to come back and take all the programs that I can and help my community, because they see that their parents are doing positivity in the community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In my household, well, I'm a grandparent now, and not really around. My kids are grown now, but as I mentioned before, I talked about this issue in my classes years back. So my kids always heard it. They always heard it. So I was talking about, once I began to find out only when I was much older, even in my 30s, about the details of my own family, my grandmother, and the impact it had on my mother and my whole aunts and uncle, and etc. And I at first it was like, oh yeah, there's nothing, and I even heard that. Oh, yeah, it was all good. But as I dug a little deeper, etc., I realized the impacts. And in many different ways, language, again, going back to the whole thing is why did, we know that. We know all the reasons. So you don't have to go through it. But then I began making it a point of, making sure I talked about it I was talking about it in school. I'm going to talk about it at home. They're in some of those same types of classes, and they're seeing the same film, and making sure we talk about it. So they've heard it and probably sick and tired of it sometimes, That's hearing so much of it. But I think that some of the surprise was still surprised to hear the part about all of these children, and just the impact when it really comes down to there's seeing something on film is great, one thing, but also when things like your project, etc., that impacted them, and other news, other various projects or other events, so that it still impacted, even though they heard about it, even though they'd heard stuff about the impact upon our own family and how residential schools impacted. From me, they still were struck by it, I think. And I think that it's part of the reason why they're, a lot of reasons, but why I feel they're find that they have made it a point that in a lot of ways my children are going to learn about this. My children are going to know about this. My children are likely going to, use that knowledge in a positive way. And I think that's what it is, being kind of, I guess, in a positive way, but forceful. That's what I'm trying to say, is that I think it's important that we keep on talking about it. I think that these issues have impacted all of us, impacted me. Sometimes it's just like, I knew about it already. I tried to do that kind of thing already. But still, no matter when I would see a film, when I went to see the moccasins, etc., like that, it still had an impact on me, and it still like drove it home. It makes you focus, think about why I do certain things. Why is it? And I was trying to analyze about why do I do that, and then I think about it and I say, I know why. I know why.
I think we all do that.
Yeah.
And it goes back to a lot of our families.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stories I could talk. I tell stories, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, it's just, there's so many different things that, a lot of trauma that has happened, some of them outward, and some of them that we've kept kind of suppressed, and maybe some of us don't want to talk about. And, so that's impacted some of the stuff, but we need the language programs. As I say, I keep going back to that. But the other thing is, when we talk about reconciliation, what is reconciliation? Yeah, okay, apologies. You hear apologies, that's great. As I said, you see these land acknowledgements.
That's
you see
awareness.
all of these things. That's a big part of it. That's important. But action needs to happen. And then not just a land acknowledgement. What about the land?
Yeah.
For example.
Mic drop.
I think, Harley, also what you didn't touch on is that you're fortunate that you had a grandmother who was a pioneer and starting a lot of movement with the children. And I think those are my children's great grandmother, right?
Yeah,
so I always hear the stories from that. And I love that your family always comes together still, even extended here and there, to gather and honor her. And she was, the stories I hear, she was such a beautiful woman in that. So.
She went through that experience. The stories only came to us later. Like I said, in my 30s, my mother and the family didn't talk about it. So she enjoyed it. She thought she was good. Maybe she was a good student. It only came out later. And so she didn't get it as rough. But when later on it began to dig a little, the stories started coming out. They didn't tell us. And so some of these stories came out. And when we talk about survivors, she was a survivor. She did do many, many interesting and important and powerful things, in the community and for her family. And some things when you dig a little bit deeper, again, behaviors and stuff like that, that's why. None of them could really speak the language. None of my aunts and my mother and stuff, they worked at it depending on their situations afterwards. But there were all of these, this is how we do it. And it goes back to that. And it's really difficult to rebuild. Mm-hmm. And really, and then you say, well, why don't we speak? Well, I didn't get it. Okay. And for a while I was like upset. I was angry. I was angry on my side. My father's side, he was a speaker. All the stories about how did they expect us to
have identity
and how to learn it if we weren't speaking to us, even though they could speak it. But it was in their heads.
Was that fear?
The fear of what's going to happen to us, the future, that all of that kind of stuff. Even though they had the ability to talk to us, for example, and then now I'm not feeling capable of helping, aiding my children, and so we have to rebuild those layers, and that's why I go back to that. There should be unlimited support, not from our community, from the people who did that, and it should be there, and nobody should, like you said, you sort of indicated you had to make some tough decisions, Kimberly.
Yeah, I mean your family off. Too, like two of your children went through the language program just like I did, and it's a huge commitment.
Yeah,
you're putting yourself out there, going back to school, not just being a student, but you're putting the weight of your ancestors on your shoulders. And that is a huge weight. It's heavy. Mm-hmm. You're going to school every day, breaking down those intergenerational trauma barriers.
Right. That's what it is.
Just walking in the door is a feat in itself. Getting to class every day for some people was really difficult because mm-hmm. it's not just about, I'm going to go and I'm going to learn the language. Why didn't I learn this language? And then if you mispronounce something, well, I should have known better, because it's in us, right? That's our identity. We should be able to do it, but it's not our fault that we didn't have those opportunities. And that's very difficult. And you're right. Like the students who are taking those strides need that support. The teachers, the people who are working in all those programs, mm-hmm. Our language speakers who are advanced level, they need that support. They're the ones who are carrying the language in our community. There's only a limited amount of people who are advanced level speakers or superior. And like, we need to get people to that level so that we can continue it. So in a few years, we're not going to have those first language elders who have all of that data in their brain.
Mm-hmm. We've done remarkable things, obviously, in the community, but mm-hmm. can you imagine if we had even more support and
it's coming. I don't know. I hope it's fast enough.
But action
that's real action.
That's action
helping
has to
us
follow.
to do that.
Yeah, and a lot has happened, but there needs to be continued and guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And I think
something we were talking about yesterday on the phone, Harley and I, land-based learning, like really getting back to the land. You say land back, mm-hmm. to have those spaces, get back to make it normal to be planting, to live off the land, to preserve food throughout the winter. There's not many people in the community who are doing it. It's coming back. It's more popular. Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to do it and then I got busy with life and then life took over and I don't really do it as much anymore. And I'm mad at myself for not doing it. But like the knowledge is there, but the action's not there from me. So like it's on me too. But as a community, we need to do more of those things. We see it in our schools. They're doing forest programs where our kids are going out and they're learning more on the land and they're taking part in agriculture, and we have agriculture programs, out there, permaculture, like people are doing it. So there's positivity coming forward in our community. Absolutely.
I want to see Sunday schools. You know how the Greek get their children to learn?
Yeah.
And they go to Sunday school for language, and that's why everybody can speak their language. I love that. Programs like that.
You see it many cultures where they have multilingual children. Yeah. Families that are multilingual, and you'll have maybe a Spanish-speaking mother, French-speaking father, and then the kid goes to school in English or Romanian or whatever, Greek, and they're able to do it. Why can't we do it?
Well, part of the thing is those languages are, the number of them that you mentioned are also very related.
Yes.
And so once you got one, you've already
It's
got
easier to
step
learn.
1 or
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
So they're, not trying to take anything away from those people who have done those great things, and they
Bit
are.
easier.
It's
But you
also
gotta
a documented language.
Yeah,
It's easy,
exactly. It's
accessible to learn, where ours is not.
And if you want to go, there are places there to go and immerse yourself every day, every moment, etc. And we always talk about, well, the French could go back to France, although it'd be different, but they could go back and immerse and get that language. Well, we don't have, But it really goes back to all of the things that happened to all of these young people that were taken away. The damages that were done. We're dealing with a lot of different issues, whether it be social, emotional, et cetera, et cetera. These are things that we're trying to rebuild. The structure of our families, everything like that, the language, and all of the connection to land-based. But you need land also.
Yeah.
And I know it gets away from all of that. I mean, it makes it a little bit bigger. For my whole thing is when we look at the moves by the Canadian government, et cetera, to in curriculum, the provincial governments and all that, to do better educating, but also, we're sorry. Well, you're sorry. Do this step. And what about, Gunawaga is 13,000 acres.
I just saw on...
it's getting tough.
I just saw in the news that Onondaga
Got
received land back. How much?
1,000 acres.
1,000 acres.
1,000 acres back.
Out of 25 million.
Yeah. Or something. I think there was 4 million. We had
2.5. Sorry.
Yeah.
Here, we'll give you a cake, but you can only have the crumbs.
It sounds big. It sounds good until you know the size of 1,000 acres. And in the big picture, when I'm at the cultural center and I give a tour and I see the maps. Okay, and you see the map of our territory, and I wish people listening would see the map. Of course, I think a lot of people know, but you never know.
Come and visit, you'll see it.
You look, come and visit the cultural center, and I'll show you around. And then you see the areas that we have, and part of that was the whole idea of taking our children away, and then taking the land away, taking them away, so no one's fighting for that land anymore, making them so they just not fight because they're not thinking themselves as staying who we are.
Take the fight out of it.
Yeah, take the fight out of it. That's another way to put it. And when you see that and people get a visual, they go, whoa, I often get that, whoa, well, that's not, this and that. There's a few times. And so really, if you want to make the part of the answer is the land base, we can do more things with it. We have, there are ways. But if you want to make a real commitment to reconciliation, the real commitment, of course, is to support even more these important programs like In Language, as an example, but also really be honest about, some of this land needs to be in the holders of the people who are stewards, who always were taking care of it.
So there's a really interesting quote of the goal of the residential schools, because that's what a lot of questions that I got from a lot of people when I've done presentations was like, well, didn't you know? And where were the parents? And why didn't? And they don't understand. And why didn't the language continue even though they were just in day school? But the goal of the residential school when they first put it in place in 1875 was to instill in them the pronounced distaste for native life so that they will be humiliated when reminded of their origin. When they graduate from the institutions, the children will have lost everything native except for their blood. So that's really what it was, is that they were indoctrinated to hate themselves and hate their identity and hate who they were. So that was never something that they felt that they needed to get back and that they needed, but their souls needed it and our people need it as our core of who we are.
They made it desirable too. They thought they would take, maybe the eldest kid in the family, and then they would say like, oh, you're so smart, we're going to take you. You get to go to school. And then they would look at the next kid and they would say, you're not smart enough, you can't come. So then that kid would be like, what? I'm not good enough to go to school? And then the younger one, they're like, oh, we're going to come back for you in a few years. Little did they know that family, what was going to be happening. So then that kid always has that self-doubt, doesn't know he was actually fortunate to not go to the schools, but they mess with that kid anyway. And then everything happened to the older sibling, and then come get the younger guy.
I'm going to tell you a personal story about my journey, okay? That has to do with, I'm not going to go into great detail. I don't always tell this. I went away to Bishop's University. I went to a couple of universities and I made some great friends. And still keep in touch with a group of them that we're really tight with. Non-native guys, most excellent guys, because I gravitated to them. I taught them a little bit about who I was, but they were just generally good persons. Spread out all over. Keep in touch. A few times we get, gather. 2 years ago, 2022, yeah, it's 2 years ago. We gathered in Quebec City, and we got together and we sat and we stayed for 2 or 3 nights together and hung out and stuff and went to restaurants and caught up. And I was sitting there one night talking to them, talking about, changes that had happened in our lives. And at one point I said something to them to the effect of, you guys have changed, and I've changed. I said, and I listened, and I said, when I was going to school at university with you guys, I wanted to be like you. They looked at me like they weren't sure what that was. I said, yeah, I wanted to be like you. I says, but now I don't want to be like you. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's hard to understand. A couple of the guys really got it more. There's like 2 or 3 of them, of the 5 or 6, really got it, and they understand. And that's all I can say is I said that to them because I recognized my journey and what had happened, and I'm still friends with them. That's because of mutual respect and stuff like that. And they've made personal, commitments to learning more. But that's it. And that's the challenge that we all, I don't know, challenge, but that's my story.
I think we all have that little bit of challenge. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people that we meet all over, they ask. Mm-hmm. They ask about, what our challenges are. And sometimes I answer, we live in 2 worlds. We have to balance who we are. We have to balance our culture, our traditions, our language, raising our children, being mindful, gardening. We got to do all that. And then we have to live in modern society, and we have to get a good education and get good jobs, and we have to dress properly. And then if you want to have like a home, well, now we have modern homes. So you got to have a modern home and drive modern cars because our communities don't have public transport like other places. And we're forced to live in 2 worlds, and we're forced to make those choices as young people of which world is going to be more important. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I struggle with that in myself because I come from 2 worlds as it is. So it's like almost a double whammy. And I feel like living here, I've gotten the opportunity to learn more about this side of myself than I have my other. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately. So, not that I hate the other side of myself. I love it, but I was never taught anything because they were very colonized too. So,
well, and that's the whole world has been affected by colonization. Yeah. Everybody in the world, no matter what color you are, no matter where you come from, whether your people were the ones colonizing, you've been affected by it. Mm-hmm. And it's out there. And it's a matter of educating yourself about what happened to those peoples, about what was done.
You almost come why we were talking about a situation yesterday. You almost become wired a certain way.
Yeah.
Whether you said on whichever side you're coming from, they're wired a certain way. I hate using, but you're in that society, in that part of the world, whether it be colonized or colonized, you end up being wired. Your thinking is, and sometimes you often don't understand.
Well, and that's the product of residential schools as well, right? Mm-hmm. We were the product of being raised that way and the product of abuse and violence. Mm-hmm. So now we need to break it, and we are breaking it.
Yeah. And that's something when I give tours with the kids in the community, the few times I have, I'm constantly stressing to them how cool they are, how awesome they are. And I don't think our people realize how much of a beacon we are worldwide. A lot of people look to us as people who have stood up to the government. So it's something that we need to enhance and celebrate and really instill that in our children of how awesome they are and how much of an individual nation we are. And that's okay. And that we don't have to be like the outside to succeed. Because that's the reason why I don't have the language. I didn't get to go to school in the community because my parents saw that the French language laws were coming into play. And it'll be a good idea if I had French schooling instead of schooling in the community. And my son now goes to school in the community. And sometimes his father will say that he wants him to go outside of the community. And I tell him, well, you're getting a gift right now, and you're getting something that I wish I had. And my older son went to Gariwanoru, and that was amazing because he got to be in the forest, he got to be on the land, he got to learn how to cultivate natural medicines, how to trap with your kids' great uncle, Weigert and Gilbert, and he was an amazing, amazing teacher. So giving them that give back in the community, in our school systems, is really something that is helping our kids get to where we need our people to be.
That's the hardest choice as a parent, though.
Yeah.
So difficult.
It's the hardest choice because you want them to learn all these things, but at the same time, you don't want them to struggle because you want them to get farther in their education. So it's like, it's a battle. You know, I chose to have my school, kids in school, elementary school here, but they decided they wanted to go out.
But see, it's a base. They've
it's a
gotten
base.
that base.
They've gotten it and they're going out. But because of that base,
they
see
have a
them going
connection.
back.
Exactly.
You know, so, but it's a hard decision and it hurts sometimes because it's like, I would love to see them go to our local high school, but at the same time, that's not what they wanted, and I have to let them make those choices. So that's your first big choice for yourself. Your first big decision, where are you going to go? I will take you to all the schools and you decide. So,
and even as parents, when you make those decisions, that's something our family had the discussion as well. And my kids go to the immersion school too. But I had that in the back of my mind, well, I can help them learn French eventually because I know it's going to come. And then once they started, reaching kindergarten, and I think during the pandemic, because I was homeschooling them during the pandemic, I realized, I needed to step it up because I won't be able to help them with homework after a certain point. And if I want them to be language speakers, then I need to have them speaking at home. And that's why I went to school. That's why I became a higher level speaker, because I couldn't do it at a novice base. I can't have a full conversation with them. And now I can argue with them if I want. So it's about making those choices and giving them that opportunity. But like what Bronwyn said, showing them that they are cool. And I tell my kids that all the time. And that's how I teach them about truth and reconciliation. Not all of us have that opportunity to go to school in our language. And, you have that best opportunity right now. You're going to school. Our people are teaching our kids. You're safe. We don't have to worry about you. We know you're in great hands. We know that every day you're having a great time. Everybody in the school knows your name.
Exactly.
It's community. It's family. I'm like, you're not going to get that anywhere else. And it's remarkable that we can do that. Like, our community has done amazing things. And I think all of our families have been part of that, and it's so lovely to see how good we're doing, that we're just going to do better, and that our kids are going to lead us.
I think that brings us back to reflecting on that. The three of you have said how it's a tough choice and a tough decision sometimes about, but you know what? You're part of making that choice. You can make that choice today. You can make those decisions about what, or at least be part of it with your children about, what you want them or what their goals are, and say, well, we'll do this, or I can give them more, but you have a choice because you're with them. And it brings us back to the beginning of this. Many those people, those children and their parents did not even have a choice on any level whatsoever. Maybe the only choice in a few cases was whether or not their decision was, because some of them were in bad situations. That's how they preyed on some of the people in this community. Well, they're going to have
They'll be able
food.
to eat every day.
They'll eat every day when they're only getting one meal a day right now. They're going to be clothed a little. So that was the choice, the only choices that our people here and in other communities might have had. Some communities, 100% had no choice. We're a little bit more fortunate in some ways on that level, but not many.
And that's why it's so important for people outside of the communities to really take that step to learn, because every community has a different story.
Yeah.
Every community has had a different experience with the church, with residential schools, with Indian day schools. So it's so important for these people to do that research, to find out what people have experienced, how they've been affected, so that they can support us.
Well, on that note, I'm going to wrap this up because I think we've had a great discussion. It's been a while. I want to thank you guys, for opening up and sharing. It's not always easy. It's a difficult topic. It's important we talk about it. And I had more questions that I didn't even get to ask. So that's all right. We talked about a lot. So Nyawakoa, it was a great discussion. I hope everybody who is listening in really enjoyed listening. You know where to find us. If you want to come and learn more and talk about it some more, you can reach us at the Welcome Center or stop by Jessica's store and really, have these talks. It's important that we talk about it. It's part of what we do at tourism, educating through tourism. And we want people to learn. We want you to know. We want the truths to be known, even for our own Kahnawake Hironu or other Ungwehome people, so other natives across Turtle Island. Learn about what happened, and it's okay. So Nyawakoa, everybody, for listening in. Thank you all for sharing again. And I hope that you enjoyed listening. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you reach out and learn a little bit more. Nyawakoa, Tanu, Have a great day.
Nyawa.
Now go.
Yeah.
Ano.